What's going on, gang? It is a great day here on Out of Bounds DFS. My name's CJ. Welcome to today's video. We're going to be talking about the PrizePicks NBA board for February 25th. It's a little bit after 11:30 a.m. here on the East Coast. So if you're watching today's video, just keep in mind that the projections you see are probably going to change throughout the day. They typically do as news breaks and as the action starts rolling in. The folks over at PrizePicks start adjusting those projections. So big news. We broke 600 subscribers this morning. Thank you everybody for helping me hit my goal for the month of February, which was to reach 600 subscribers by March 1st. We did it. And I couldn't have done it without you, so I appreciate all your help and continued support. Now, if this is your first time to the channel, welcome to Out of Bounds DFS. On this channel, we talk all things single-player daily fantasy sports. So that includes PrizePicks, Monkey Knife Fight, and some of the other ones that are on the way up, like Thrive Fantasy. We'll get into those eventually as they continue to grow with us. So, in today's video, we will do things a little bit different. I'm going to tweak the format ever so slightly, try to talk about more relevant players that we might like or not like versus going through, the top player from every team. So hopefully that ends up working out well for us and translates to more success and better lineups and better picks. But to start things off, per usual, we are going to talk injury news. So we're going to start here at the top of the board. Not a whole lot of injury news to talk about, but some big names. Kristaps Porzingis, power forward for the Dallas Mavericks, is questionable with back stiffness. Kevin Durant, forward for the Brooklyn Nets, he is considered out, and he's out indefinitely with a hamstring injury. Drew Holiday, point guard, Milwaukee Bucks, doubtful due to COVID protocol. Paul Millsap, forward for the Denver Nuggets, continues to be out with a knee injury. Easy for me to say. Dylan Brooks, guard for the Memphis Grizzlies, questionable with a thigh. Elfrid Payton, guard for the Knicks, doubtful with a hamstring. Maxi Kleber, he is questionable with a left ankle sprain. This is big news because Kleber is probably Dallas's most formidable inside defensive presence, meaning without him in the lineup, who is going to stop Joel Embiid tonight? I asked that question earlier in the Discord. By the way, if you're not a member of our Discord community, it's totally free to join. I'll leave a link down in the description of this video. But I mentioned that question. I said, who's going to stop Embiid tonight? And somebody jokingly, I think it was jokingly, said, Boban Marjanovic will stop Joel Embiid. Well, good luck, Boban. Good luck, Dwight Powell, whoever else suits up for the Dallas Mavericks. I really like Joel Embiid tonight. Now, JaMychal Green, he's the forward for the Denver Nuggets. He's going to be out with a shoulder. Jeff Green, forward for the Nets. He's questionable with a shoulder as well. Gary Harris, Denver Nuggets, out with an adductor. Hassan Whiteside, Sacramento center, he is out due to COVID protocol. And Davis Bertans, forward for the Washington Wizards, he's going to be questionable with a knee. But that's it. I mean, those are the biggest news stories and things to monitor. So let's jump into the projections today. And as I mentioned, we're going to try and do things a little bit different. Hopefully it works out for us. We'll see. We're winging it. I don't script any of these videos. We do them on the fly. And we figure it out as we go. So the very first game on the PrizePicks board tonight is the Dallas Mavericks taking on the Philadelphia 76ers. Kind of already alluded to liking Joel Embiid here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to Roto Grinders. And as you can see, I don't have any projections up right now. And what I'm going to do here is just go game by game here. So we're going to click on Dallas and click on Philly to enable the projections for that game. And we'll start things off by talking game totals and spreads. So Philadelphia 115.75, that makes them about 4.5 point home favorites against the Dallas Mavericks here at 111.25. So you're talking about a 4.5 point spread. For me, it's right on the cusp of staying green. In other words, I don't think that there's a major blowout risk or blowout concern here. Now, if guys like Kristaps Porzingis, Maxi Kleber are out of the lineup, well, I think that this becomes a higher risk for blowout and that there's a greater chance that this game does get away from the Dallas Mavericks and that they can't keep up with this Philadelphia 76ers team. So I probably put this one in the green, creeping into yellow for me in terms of blowout risk. So talking totals here, though, 27 points. Very good totals here. There should be plenty of fantasy upside. So we got a number of different guys on the board here. Luka Doncic, Kristaps Porzingis, Tim Hardaway Jr., and then for Philly, we got Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, and Tobias Harris. 3 guys from each team. So where we're going to start this little clip is right here in this DVA, and I've mentioned this in previous videos, but the reason I like this is because it's sort of like DVP, defense versus position, but it goes a bit further. So instead of DVP, where it uses just generic positions of point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, and center, this actually goes a step further and breaks those positions up, those 5 positions, into more specific positions. So for example, Luka Doncic, obviously he plays point guard, but they consider him to be a combo guard more specifically. So we're going to use DVA today to start, and I'll filter, or sort rather, by the highest DVA, and we'll start there. So as you can see, this one stands out to me right away. Luka Doncic, who is at 54.78 fantasy points. His projection today is 55 over on PrizePicks. So pretty similar in terms of projection. Let's look at his recent game logs real quick. And you can see in his last 5 here, he's been playing very good basketball. If we go back to the game against Atlanta, 59, that would put him over. 76 would put him well over. 60.9, well over. Now this one he fell short at 41.9, and then 55, that would have been a push, falling right on today's projection of 55. So in his last 5 games, he's went over 3 out of 5 games, and he's got 1 game in there where he landed right on 55. It was a push, as I mentioned. So looking back here, I don't have any recent game logs of Luka versus Philly. So let's get into the minutes for Luka. He's expected to play 36 minutes here. I mentioned him being a combo guard, and this is what stands out to me, this 53.25 number. The reason that stands out is because that's how many fantasy points per game that the Philadelphia 76ers allowed to combo guards like Luka Doncic. So if you hover over this, it explains defense versus archetype. So the fantasy points per game today's opponent, which is the Philadelphia 76ers, has allowed to this player's archetype. So Luka Doncic being a combo guard, Philadelphia being the opponent, they allow 53.25 fantasy points per game, which makes them the 6th most generous in the entire NBA to allowing fantasy points per game to combo guards like Luka. So hopefully that makes sense. That's what we're going to be basing today's video around. He's been playing 3 games and 4 nights here, so rest could be a little bit of an issue here. He could be a little fatigued. 35.3 minutes per game and a fantasy point per minute of 1.53. Average with a usage rating of over 36. So very good fantasy point per minute producer, and his usage rating is off the charts. So I like this spot for Luka Doncic here, because if they're allowing 53.25 fantasy points to combo guards, just any old generic combo guard, imagine what a great combo guard like Luka Doncic could do if this game stays close and competitive. So let's work our way down this list here and see if we could target anybody else from this game. Next guy up, Joel Embiid. Embiid's projected at 52.4. Over on PrizePicks, he's at 53.5. So they like the under on Roto Grinders with Embiid. Let's look at his recent game logs. And you can see if we dial it back here to 5 games ago against the Phoenix Suns, he dropped 48.6 points. Not good enough for an over tonight, so that would be an under. He missed this game against Utah. 60.7 against Houston, though. That would have put him well over. 93.9. That would have put him over and over again. And then 52.4 and a 35.4. Terrible game here against the Toronto Raptors. And it wasn't due to a lack of playing time. He did play over 35 minutes. So in his last 5 games, guys, he's went over tonight's projection of 52, was it? Oh, sorry, 53.5. It went up. 53.5 once, twice, just twice out of his last 5 games. So not a very good success rate in terms of going over, but let's move along here and talk minutes. 35 minutes is the projection for Joel Embiid. He is a versatile big. Versatile bigs against this Dallas Mavericks team. Mavericks are allowing 33.92 fantasy points per game to versatile bigs. So while it doesn't stand out and jump off the page like a 53-point average, 33.92 is still pretty good. That makes this Dallas Mavericks team the 10th most giving, the 10th most generous defense in the entire league to versatile bigs. So to say this is a good matchup for Joel Embiid, that would be a fair statement. Now, this is 2 games and 3 nights for him. He's playing just under 33 minutes per game. And this is why Embiid is just such a monster and my favorite pick for MVP so far this season. 1.6 fantasy points per minute. My, oh my, he even tops the great Luka Doncic in that category. And then a usage rating of 33.23. So very, very strong usage rating, especially for a center. You just don't see very many centers hitting 30 or more in terms of usage rating. So liking the way that one is setting up. Now, the next guy that falls in line here is Tobias Harris. He's at 35.99 fantasy points, which puts him just slightly under 36, which is pretty much on point here, guys. 36 for Tobias Harris, looking like the correct projection here. Let's dig into his game logs real quick and see what he has been up to. All right, so we go back 5 games. Tobias has been on a tear, man. I mean, these game logs are looking very juicy here. Against Utah, 57 points, then 58.5, and then 42.9, 34.3, and a 46.9. So guys, in his last 5 games, he has went over by a lot in 4 out of his last 5 games. Fantastic production at him. You could tell, or you can't really blame him, I should say, for feeling disrespected as not being a member of a big 3 conversation with Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. I mean, this dude's playing with a chip on his shoulder, and you know, I don't know that he was like being seriously considered for all-star votes. Haven't really been paying close attention, but you know, tonight might be a night where he comes out there looking to make a statement. And you know, if he's feeling like he's being overlooked or disrespected in any way, well, he's going to make sure that you know who he is tonight. So he's expected to play 35 minutes. He's a versatile forward. This Mavericks team is allowing 32.37 fantasy points per game to versatile forwards like Harris. So no, the average isn't higher than his projection, but when you consider the fact that they're allowing that many fantasy points per game to just any old generic versatile forward, and then you consider Tobias Harris being a pretty darn good player who's been playing pretty darn good basketball lately, well, this could be a situation where there's some room for, you know, that ceiling type of game for Tobias Harris, where he could go over his projection of 36 tonight. 2 games and 3 nights for him. He's playing almost 35 minutes per game, 1.1 fantasy points per minute, and a usage rating of over 23. So not fantastic fantasy points per minute in usage, but good, very good, you know. So there you have it for Tobias Harris. Now, looking down this DVA line here, let's just see if anything else really jumps out for any of these other guys that are up on the board. Maybe Tim Hardaway Jr. here, who's projected for 20.58 on Roto Grinders. His projection over on PrizePicks is 23, but as you can see, the DVA for him, the DVA for him is 22.17. So I wouldn't call this a plus matchup or a great matchup for him. Skimming down the line here, Kristaps Porzingis. We're not going to talk about him because there's a chance that he may not play. Nothing else really jumps out at me. I mean, even Ben Simmons here, who is a pretty highly projected guy in terms of points, almost 42 fantasy points. This Mavericks team has held distributor point guards like Ben Simmons, guys who are pass first point guards, to 17.71 fantasy points per game. So I would call this not a plus matchup, maybe a negative matchup for Ben Simmons. So there you have it for the main guys out of that game. Hopefully that helps you get a better idea of who we're feeling and who we aren't. So let's move on to the next game. We got the Orlando Magic taking on the Brooklyn Nets. And as a Magic fan, I mentioned that today in Discord that I looked and I saw James Harden and Kyrie Irving versus my poor Orlando Magic. And I basically went and hid under the covers because this game is probably going to be one that gets out of hand here. The Magic have struggled to stay competitive, to stay in games with some of these teams that are loaded with stars. And even though they don't have Kevin Durant, they still have way more star power than the Magic have had probably in the last 10 to 20 years. So, yeah, I wish I had James Harden or Kyrie Irving on my team. Anyway, this game tips off at 7:40 p.m. So let's go back up here and we'll uncheck Dallas and Philly, and we'll click Orlando and Brooklyn, and we will start at the top here. So Kyrie Irving is a guy that really stands out. So he's projected for 46.2 fantasy points, which is a little bit under his PrizePicks projection of 47. So they like the under. Let's look at his game logs real quick. As it loads, as the world turns. We go back to 5 games, and you can see he dropped just 37 points against the Golden State Warriors. Not a very good game for him there. 52.3 against Sacramento. Huge game there. Hit that 50 mark. He missed this one against Phoenix. 29.9. Terrible game against the Lakers and his former teammate, LeBron James. 47.8 against the Clippers, and 43.5 against Sacramento. So this number of 47 has been one that has been difficult for Kyrie to hit with consistency in his last 5 games, failing to go over in 1, 2, 3 games. So he's went over just twice, went under 3 times. Now against this Orlando Magic team, I don't see a previous game log to discuss, so we can move ahead here and talk about his minutes, where he's projected to play 36 minutes. Now he's a combo guard. The reason I mentioned Kyrie Irving is this DVA number stands out at 50.48. So that average fantasy points per game allowed to combo guards by this Orlando Magic team is fantastic for Kyrie Irving, not so fantastic if you're a Magic fan like myself. So this average is higher than his projection both on Roto Grinders and on PrizePicks, meaning that this is a potential ceiling type of game for Kyrie Irving. Now, we forgot to talk game totals and spread, which let's do it real quick. Brooklyn 118.25, Orlando 109.25. So yes, there is definite blowout potential here. In fact, I would mark this as a red game, one that I would warn you about taking anyone from this game in full game formats, as this one does look like it probably will get out of hand. As I mentioned before, Orlando just doesn't have the talent. We're so injured. We're so beat up. We can't really hang around with some of these elite teams for very long. So this one could get out of hand by halftime. It could get out of hand by the third quarter. We just, have to wait and see, but it does give me a little bit of caution here. Now, Brooklyn has a pretty high total on their side at 118.25. Orlando, well, that leaves something to be desired at just 109.25. So yeah, with that out of the way, let's jump back into Kyrie Irving real quick. So loving the DVA for him. This is 2 games in 3 nights. 35.5 minutes per game, 1.26 fantasy points per minute, and a usage rating of 29.64. I'm sure that those numbers are on the rise without Kevin Durant in the lineup. They have to be. They have to go up. So, yeah, really liking Kyrie Irving in this matchup. I think he's a guy that could potentially go over his projection on PrizePicks at 47 points. So next guy that jumps out at me is another combo guard. Again, the Orlando Magic just don't guard combo guards very well. They're allowing over 50 fantasy points per game to guys like James Harden and Kyrie Irving. Now, 58.65 is his projection for James Harden. He's projected at 58 over on PrizePicks. So they like the over on Harden. And for good reason. He's been playing fantastic basketball with Kevin Durant out of the lineup. Now we go back here to his 5th game in his game log against the Sacramento Kings. 61.6 fantasy points would put him over. 63.9 would put him over. 53.5, although it's close, it's not good enough to top 58. So that would put him under. 63.7 and 62.2. So really, you got to expect about a 60-point performance out of James Harden tonight. And in his last 5 games, he's hit 60 or more in 4 out of 5. So his chances of hitting that 60 or more mark look pretty darn good to me. Even if he did what he did here at 59.6 against Golden State, that would definitely get the job done. So liking what I'm seeing out of James Harden, playing very good basketball lately. Now let's look at his minutes and talk a little bit more about the beard. Tonight, he's expected to play about 37 minutes. He does get a ton of minutes for the season. Is a combo guard. The DVA I've already talked about, very good in his favor for sure. 2 games and 3 nights, 37.9 minutes per game, so almost 38 minutes on a per game basis for James Harden. And his fantasy points per minute are at 1.38 with a usage rating of 28.85. So, I mean, great numbers for James Harden. There's no question that this is a good matchup for both Kyrie and James Harden here. Moving down the line here, who else do we have on this Orlando Magic side? We've got Vooch, Fournier, Ross. Are any of those guys in play? Let's take a look. Not really feeling any of those guys in terms of taking the over on them. Here's Evan Fournier, Brooklyn, 20.4 fantasy points per game to shooting wings like Evan Fournier. So wouldn't call this a plus or positive matchup. Might be a tough one for him. Here's Terrence Ross, another guy who they have labeled as a shooting wing, 20.4 fantasy points per game allowed to shooting wings. So he's projected at 26, Fournier at 32. So yeah, I mean, they like the under on Terrence Ross. Fournier is pretty much right on the money. Fournier is probably either a fade or I'd go under on. Terrence Ross, he's looking like an underplay. But of course, if he gets hot, they do call him the Human Torch, and his shots start falling, he could definitely go over, definitely. So I think that's going to do it for that game. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one, which features the Sacramento Kings taking on the New York Knicks. We got the likes of De'Aaron Fox, Buddy Hield, and Tyrese Halliburton. And then Julius Randle, RJ Barrett, and Nerlens Noel for the New York Knicks. So let's head back up to the top here. We will deselect that game and select the next game. So starting off right at the top of the line here with the DVA, we've got Alec Burks, Derrick Rose. Neither of them are on PrizePicks. De'Aaron Fox. Ooh, this is looking good right here. He's projected at 40 on PrizePicks. They've got him at 40.25 on RotoGrinders, so they like a slight over. I know De'Aaron Fox has been struggling. Let's look at his game logs real quick. So if we head back to his fifth game here, 37.6 against Brooklyn. That would be an under. 29.8 would be well under. 39.1 just slightly missed that 40 mark. 31.2 under, and 39.2 against Brooklyn. Another near miss in terms of taking the over on Fox. So in his last 5 games, he's went under 5 games in a row, but we know what this kid can do. We know what he's capable of. If you look back here, 43.9, 56.2, 53.3, 46.7, 57.8, he's got major upside, but hasn't been putting it together in his last 5 games. That might be a little bit of an understatement. His minutes tonight are set at 36. He is a combo guard. The Knicks are allowing 49.33 fantasy points per game to combo guards. That's why De'Aaron Fox stands out to me. 2 games in 3 nights for him, 33.5 minutes per game, 1.16 fantasy points per minute, and his usage rating is 30.87. So, I mean, the game totals and spread here, I give it a green in terms of spread. It's just a 2-point spread, and the game totals 224 combined points. I think that's pretty healthy, pretty strong. This is setting up as a good situation here for Mr. De'Aaron Fox. Now, let's move down the line here and see if there's anyone else that really stands out. We got Julius Randle at 45.96 fantasy points, which would put him over by a couple points versus PrizePicks. And you could see why the Sacramento Kings team, they're just 7th, or they're 7th in terms of most generous or most giving to versatile bigs like Randle, allowing 34.41 fantasy points per game. So if we look at his game logs real quick, 46.5, 43.8, 32.9, 59.3, and 37.8. So in his last 5 games, he's went over today's projection just 2 times out of 5, as that 44 has been a little difficult for him to hit in recent games. Now, it's not like he's missing by a ton, at least in some of these games, but he is missing nonetheless. So just 2 games out of his last 5 has he went over 44 points. Came really close here against Minnesota with 43.8. Now, I don't have any previous game logs of him versus Sacramento. Let's talk his minutes real quick and get into some of the other stats. 36 minutes. I mentioned versatile big. Although this average is lower than what he's projected to score tonight, this still is probably kind of a soft matchup with him versus Sacramento. 2 games in 3 nights. Minutes per game over 36. Fantastic. 1.2 fantasy points per minute and a usage rating of 27. So very good fantasy point per minute production and usage rating for Julius Randle. So again, this total looks pretty good and the spread looks even better. So if you're liking any of these guys, definitely take the over. I think that's a way to go here. Looking down the line here, see if there's anybody else that jumps out. RJ Barrett, he's in a little bit of a plus matchup here. He's projected at 27.83. They've got him at 26.5 over on PrizePicks. So they like the over on RJ Barrett, and the fact that Sacramento's allowing 28.69 fantasy points per game to scoring wings like RJ Barrett is also a good sign in his favor. Let's look at his recent game logs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so 5 games back, terrible game here, 17.3. He bounces back with a 34.7. 27.9 would be just enough to get him over today's projection of 26.5. So that's an over. 31.3 is an over. And then he has another just terrible game here of 14.5, playing just 27 minutes. So in his last 5 games, it's been a mixed bag, up and down for RJ Barrett. Hard to trust this guy, but it looks like the over is going to be the way to go for him. Let's look at his minutes real quick. You can see that he's projected to play 32 minutes. He's a scoring wing, as I talked about, plus matchup. Sacramento, second most giving, most generous to scoring wings. 2 games in 3 nights, playing over 33 minutes per game. Here's where it kind of gets ugly or bad for RJ Barrett. 0.86 fantasy points per minute. Not very good at all. Fails to reach that gold standard of 1 fantasy points per minute or more. And then his usage rating is at 22.85, which is okay, but not even close to being good or very good or even elite. So a bit to be desired there from RJ Barrett. Moving down the line here, got Nerlens Noel at 26.85. His projection is at 25 here on PrizePicks. So this might be a situation that might be to our advantage. They like the over on Roto Grinders. Let's dig into his game logs real quick. Noel, of course, been getting a lot more playing time since Mitchell Robinson's been injured. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We go back to his 5th game here against the Houston Rockets. 25.2, 28.8, 21.3, 23.8, and a 24. So he hasn't been hitting this 25 number with any regularity here. He's went over in just 2 out of his last 5 games and hasn't went over in his last 3 games. He gets really close. He just doesn't get the job done. But tonight might be a little different situation for Noel, as post-up bigs against this Sacramento Kings team have averaged 27.33 fantasy points per game. So this is a plus matchup here for Nerlens Noel. He's expected to play 28 minutes, 2 games and 3 nights for him. If you look at his fantasy points per minute and usage, not very good. 0.98 fantasy points per minute, and his usage at just 10.07. That may be one of the lowest usage ratings I've seen on the board. So moving down the line here, anybody else worth talking about? I don't think so. So you probably would want to consider going under on Buddy at 27.53. They got him at 28 up on PrizePicks. Yeah, nobody else really jumping off the sheet. So we're going to wrap that game up and move to the next game. Going to have to do something here about this PrizePicks site. You know, every day around 11, 12 o'clock, it seems like their website starts to lock up, freeze up, or whatever you want to call it. So we're going to try and refresh here. Yeah, exit page. We know the drill. You guys are probably doing something on the back end there. All right, the next game is going to be the Los Angeles Clippers versus the Memphis Grizzlies. And we've got some names, big names to talk about on the Clippers side. Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, Serge Ibaka. And we got Ja Morant, Jonas Valanciunas, and Dylan Brooks, who might play tonight, but he was on our injury report, so we got to be careful with him. So let's go back up here. We'll filter out those games and filter in the Clippers and Grizzlies. So starting with game totals here, Clippers 117.25. They are a big time favorite on the road against Memphis. Memphis expected to score 109.25. So you're talking about an 8-point spread here. Got to put this one in the red zone in terms of blowout risk or blowout potential. So I'd be a little cautious with taking anybody in a full game format. And I think you're going to notice that the trend in today's video, a lot of these games aren't projected to really be close or competitive. So first half might be the wave. That might be the way to go in today's slate. So we move down here and we start looking at some of these DVA numbers that stand out to us. Well, right off the top here, we've got Ja Morant, 53.25 fantasy points per game allowed by this Clippers team to combo guards like Ja Morant. Now he's projected at 35.32, which would put him as a pretty sizable under on this projection of 38 fantasy points. So Ja under, well, maybe, but let's dig into his game logs real quick and see what he's been up to. We go back to this 5th game, and you can see his last 5 games have actually been pretty good. 42.4 against the Pelicans puts him over. 46.2 against OKC, over. 39.6, over. 25.5, that puts him under, but I think they got blown out in that game. He played just 26 minutes. And then finally against Dallas, 45.3 fantasy points. So he has been playing very good basketball in his last 5 games, going over with ease in 4 out of 5 games. So when he's out there and he's playing, he's doing pretty well recently, but the problem is we've got a blowout situation on our hands. So how many minutes will Ja really play tonight? Well, we don't know. We're going to talk minutes here where he's expected to play 33. He is a combo guard. We mentioned this is a plus matchup for Ja Morant. I will give some caution that this number might be a little bit misleading because, of course, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard have missed time this season. Patrick Beverley, another guy who is a defensive monster, has missed a lot of time this season. So there's been, a different cast of characters for this Clippers team, not their usual starters, not their usual guys in the lineup. So when Beverley, George, and Leonard are all in the lineup, their defense probably goes way up and gets a lot better. I would say that's a safe bet. Now, the rest situation for Ja's looking good. Not a back-to-back or anything like that. 30.4 minutes per game, 1.16 fantasy points per minute, and a usage rating of almost 31. So fantastic usage and pretty darn good fantasy points per minute. So I'm liking this as a plus matchup for Ja. But, there's a little bit of expectations that should be quelled here in terms of upside, as this game does look like it could get away from them. Now, moving down the line here, you got 2 versatile forwards on this Clippers team. We mentioned them already, Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. This Grizzlies team is allowing 34.51 fantasy points per game to versatile forwards. Now, you factor in the fact that we're talking Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. Well, this could be a situation where either one of them has a pretty good game. Now, Paul George projected at 40.88, Kawhi Leonard 45.6. That would be a slight over on George, and it would be a pretty sizable under on Kawhi Leonard. So hard to trust either one of those guys, but especially Kawhi Leonard in that projection. Moving down the line here, you got Serge Ibaka. Now, he is in a situation that could be a plus matchup for him. So he's projected at 21.57 fantasy points on Roto Grinders. They've got him at 21 on PrizePicks. So both sites kind of agree 21, 22 in that range should be right for Serge Ibaka. Now, let's look at his game logs real quick and see what the Surge Protector has been up to. Or Serge Ibaka, whatever you want to call him. He's got a couple of cool nicknames, if you ask me. Waiting. I'm going to take a swig. Finally. There we go. Now it's all loaded up. All right, 5 games back, 17.8, not good. 14.8, not good. 25.8 would put him over, 22.6 would put him over, and 21.2 would put him over. So, yes, he had a couple of games where they were subpar, they were unders, but in his last 3, he has went over. So 3 out of his last 5 have been good for him. No previous game logs against Memphis to talk about. Tonight, he's expected to play 22 minutes. We already talked about his projection being over the 21 on PrizePicks. And here's why I'm talking about Serge Ibaka, because this Memphis Grizzlies team has allowed 31.13 fantasy points per game on average to versatile bigs. And that's what they classify Serge Ibaka as a versatile big. So this is definitely an average that's higher than both his projections on PrizePicks and on Roto Grinders. So this is a good matchup for him, a positive or plus situation. 2 games and 3 nights for Serge. He's playing almost 24 minutes per game, 1.06 fantasy points per minute, and a usage rating of 19.44. So the Ibaka over might be a way to go here. Let's move on down the line. We got Jonas Valanciunas, 34.29 post-up big. Clippers are allowing 29.54 fantasy points per game to post-up bigs. Valanciunas pretty much locked in that 34 to 35 point mark. Probably not looking at him. That might be a fade for me. Not really seeing a good edge here. So either fade or it's looking like an under might be the way to go. Lou Williams not on the board tonight. Yeah, I don't think anybody else is really jumping out at me tonight, guys. So we can go ahead and move on to the next game here. You guys let me know in the comments, by the way. Are you liking this format better? Is it helping you identify the good picks and not just any old pick? You let me know. I'm here for your feedback and your tips and your suggestions. So I make this content for you guys. I want you guys to enjoy it. Now, the next game is the Washington Wizards versus the Denver Nuggets. This one is oozing with fantasy upside and potential here. This one is shaping up to be a good one. We got on the Wizards side, Bradley Beal, Russell Westbrook, Rui Hachimura. And then we got on the Denver side, Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, who has been on one lately, playing fantastic basketball, and Michael Porter Jr. So back to Roto Grinders we go. Let's take a look here at this Washington-Denver matchup. Now, here's why I say I really like this game, because look at the total points from these two teams. It goes well over 230 points. In fact, over 235 projected points between these two teams. Spread is a little worrisome, though. Not going to lie to you. It's about a 7-point spread here. Denver, big favorites at home, so I can't give this one a green by any means in terms of spread. I'd probably put this one closer to the orange range, and it could get out of hand if Washington's heavy guard play, if their shots aren't falling, then Denver will run away with this one. So loving what I'm seeing in terms of totals. Little worried here about blowout potential. So let's start looking at the DVAs on some of these guys. Well, the first one that really catches my eye is Jamal Murray. So let's talk about him. He's projected at 39.54 on Roto Grinders, which puts him in the neighborhood here of 40 fantasy points, but a slight under according to RG. So let's move into his game logs and take a look and see what Jamal Murray's been up to. And I told you guys, he's been balling. He has been on one. So in his last 5 games, 41.2, that's an over. 59.8 is a huge over. 65.2, a tremendous over. 44.8 over, and 50 would be an over as well. Is Bubble Murray back? Are we really witnessing the return of Bubble Murray? It sure does look like it to me. He's went over in his last 5 games, doing so with ease and doing so very consistently. So let's move ahead here and talk about his minutes. He's expected to play 37 minutes. You love that number. That's a huge projection there. He's a combo guard, and why we're talking Murray is because this number right here, the Washington Wizards allowing 53.63 fantasy points per game to combo guards like Jamal Murray. So this average allowed by the Wizards is way higher than both his projections on Roto Grinders and on PrizePicks, which means this could be a ceiling type of game for Jamal Murray. He could easily soar past 40 fantasy points in this one. 2 games in 3 nights, 35.1 minutes per game on the season. Now, his fantasy points per minute and usage ratings, they don't really stand out to you. I mean, he barely goes over 1 at 1.01 fantasy points per minute, and his usage rating, 24.65, fails to meet the 25 or more that I typically look for. But still, guys, looking at his recent game logs, his last 5, he's just been balling out. So I really like taking the over on Jamal Murray here. It looks like a plus matchup. The next guy that catches my eye is Russell Westbrook, who is projected at 47.34 on Roto Grinders. So if we compare that to where he's at on PrizePicks, well, they're pretty much in the same neck of the woods here on his projection, 47 to 48 points. So let's dig into his recent games and see what Russ has been up to. This is another guy who's just been playing lights out lately. Kind of a slow start to the season, but he has really picked up his performance in recent games. So we head back to his 5th game against the Houston Rockets, his former team, 49.1. That would put him over tonight's projection of 48. 46.6, very good, but still not 48. So that'd be an under. 52.7 would be well over 48. 60.3, well over. And 48.8, just enough to get by 48 fantasy points. So in his last 5 games, you could see he's went over in 4 out of his last 5, coming really close to doing it 5 out of 5 times. So as I mentioned, Russell Westbrook is balling, y'all. Now, why I like him tonight? Well, he's expected to play 36 minutes, and this number here stands out to me. The Denver Nuggets Although they rank 25th as being the 25th least giving, least generous, or most stingy, however you want to look at that number, the average that they're giving up is 45.59. Now, that's a great average to just any old no-name combo guard, but this is Russell Westbrook, who has proven in recent games that he still got it, and he's still one of the better combo guards in the league. So I do like this matchup for him, although it's not as good or doesn't look as good on paper as a plus or positive matchup. As I mentioned, Westbrook has just been too hot to hold. So in his last game, or tonight's rest situation rather, 3 games in 4 nights, playing a lot of games lately, a lot of minutes. He had an overtime game. He's playing 34 minutes per night, 1.32 fantasy points per minute to go along with a usage rating of 33.72. So loving the way that things are shaping up for Russell Westbrook. Now, Rui Hachimura is another guy that's standing out here because his projection on RotoGrinders is 24.69. His projection on PrizePicks is at 26. But if you look at how many fantasy points per game Denver's allowing to versatile forwards like Rui, well, 35.23. So we've got to talk about him. That is a big-time plus matchup for him. Now, his last 5 games, he's went 36, 26, 33, 24, and 24.8. So this projection of 26, he's hit overs on in 1, 2, 3 out of his last 5. So pretty good success rate in terms of going over. We do have a previous game of Rui versus Denver here where he played 29 minutes, and that was one where he went barely over 26, ended up at 26.3. So I'm liking the chances of Rui going over once again. He's expected to play 32 minutes. He is a versatile forward. We already mentioned this being a good positive plus matchup for him. They're allowing an average of 35.23, which puts them, on average about 10 points higher than what he's expected to score tonight. I think there's some room for him to have a ceiling game. This is 3 games in 4 nights, playing 30.3 minutes per game, a 0.8 fantasy points per minute. It's not very good at all, and neither is his usage at 17.87. But when you're playing alongside 2 fantasy point per minute and usage monsters like Brad Beal and Russell Westbrook, well, that there's going to just be crumbs left over, unfortunately. Now, the next guy that jumps out is Michael Porter. Michael Porter Jr. is at 32 fantasy points over on PrizePicks. He's at 32.59 on RotoGrinders. Let's talk about his recent games real quick because he's been a guy who's been mentioned a lot in our Discord lately. In the last 5 games, he's went under in all 5 games, guys. He has failed to hit this 32 mark. So not looking good here for Michael Porter Jr. Against Washington, he did score 27.9 fantasy points, but still not enough here. So the under's looking like the way to go so far on Porter Jr. Working in his favor is the fact that he's going to play 32 minutes according to RotoGrinders, and Washington, they're allowing 34.78 fantasy points per game to versatile forwards, that average being higher than both his projections on RotoGrinders and PrizePicks. So I think there's some wiggle room here for Porter to have a good game. 27.5 minutes per game, 1.01 fantasy points per minute, and a usage rating of 18.73. So his usage is really hurting him. He doesn't touch the basketball nearly enough. Of course, with Jokic and Murray on the team, there's just, again, not enough of basketballs to go around and feed all these guys. So Nikola Jokic projected for 59.81. Washington giving up 31.54 fantasy points per game to versatile bigs. He's a guy that maybe you could look at in terms of taking the over. Of course, we know what Jokic can do here. Let's just pop into his game logs and look at his last game versus Washington, get an idea. So he played almost 37 minutes, ended up with 57.9 fantasy points. So yeah, he barely missed, went under here, but maybe he has a better game tonight. They expect him to go over. Looking down the line here, nothing else really jumping out at me. So I'm going to wrap this game up, and let's go ahead and move on to the next one, which is the New Orleans Pelicans versus the Milwaukee Bucks. There's lots of big names here, lots of fantasy potential. Another game that has high totals, so that usually means higher fantasy upside. So we've got Zion Williamson here, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Brandon Ingram, Chris Middleton, Lonzo Ball, Dante DiVincenzo. Sounds like a good Italian name to me. Yes. We'll start things off with the New Orleans Pelicans side. So let's go back up here. We'll check off some of these guys or teams and look at the totals for this next game. So Milwaukee 125.75 versus New Orleans 116.75. So you're talking about a spread that's quite large here, guys. 9-point spread. Milwaukee is the favorite. Let's look at the DVA on some of these guys. And, you know, DVA, DiVincenzo, they just go together here, right? The New Orleans Pelicans are allowing 50.54 fantasy points per game to combo guards like DiVincenzo. Now, he is projected at 25.75 on Roto Grinders, putting him just slightly under his PrizePicks projection. Let's see what he's been up to lately. Will we experience Dante's Inferno tonight? We'll have to find out. 25.6 in his fifth game back against Toronto. 27.4 against Toronto. 11.7, not very good at all. 25.9 and 24.5. So this projection here of 26 has been a number that DiVincenzo has failed to hit in 4 out of his last 5 games. So he's only went over once out of his last 5. Looking back, do we have a game against New Orleans here in recent game logs? We do not, so we can jump ahead and talk minutes. He's expected to play 30 minutes, good number. He's a combo guard, and this Pelicans team, again, allowing 50.54 fantasy points per game to combo guards. So I would consider this to be a very good matchup here for Dante DiVincenzo. 2 games in 3 nights, 26.4 minutes per game on the season. 0.85 fantasy points per minute and a usage rating of 17.6. So he should play a good amount of minutes as long as Drew Holiday stays out of the lineup. Of course, he's playing alongside Chris Middleton and Giannis Antetokounmpo. So not a lot of fantasy points per minute to be had or usage to be had here. So he has to be ultra productive with the minutes that he does get and hopefully make some shots and stuff. So moving down the line here, who else do we have on the board? Is Eric Bledsoe up today? No Eric Bledsoe. Zion Williamson? All right, yeah, I can get on board with that. Zion Williamson projected for 40.91 points. That would put him under his projection of 43. Even if we rounded it up and call it 41, let's dig into the game logs and see how Zanos, Big Z, whatever you want to call him, how he's been doing. 51.4 against Memphis, huge over. 54.2, huge over. Phoenix, not so good. 30 points, 46, and then a 49.7. So in his last 5 games, he's went over 43 in 4 out of 5. 4 out of 5 is a pretty good success rate. No previous games to talk about versus Milwaukee. He's expected to play 33 minutes tonight. He is a versatile forward. Now, this Bucks team is giving up 36.11 fantasy points per game to versatile forwards. But again, this is one of the better or best versatile forwards in the entire league. So you can expect Zion to at least get 36, but I think there's some upside, some potential here for him to go even higher. Now, this is a back-to-back for him. He's playing over 32 minutes per game, 1.25 fantasy points per minute, and a usage rating of over 27, talking 27.5. So, good little spot for him. Is Steven Adams on the board? No, he's not. He's in a... Oh, yeah, he is. Sorry, and so is Bledsoe. They're just down the line here. If PrizePicks website was working right, I can like scroll down, but it's not. Steven Adams is at 23. They got him projected for 24.5. He should be back for the Pelicans tonight. Now, the Milwaukee Bucks are giving up 32.83 fantasy points per game against post-up bigs. So, guys, I'm liking this matchup for Steven Adams as well. Very good plus or positive matchup for Adams. Actually, he played last night. He made his return to the Pelicans last night and put up 44.5 points. Holy cow. If we go back to his 5th game here, only 8.3 against Dallas, played just 19 minutes. Kind of weird. 29, 30, 5.6, terrible. I think he got injured in that game. And then 44.5 last night in his return. I didn't realize he had such a big game. So in his last few games, he's went over 3 out of his last 5. There's a couple games in there that probably we should just toss out where he played 19 minutes and just 9 minutes. But overall, this looks like a good spot for Adams to do his thing. Now, he's going to play about 28 minutes, according to Roto Grinders. I mentioned earlier, post-up bigs against Milwaukee have been eating 32.83 fantasy points per game. Back-to-back for Adams, 28 minutes per game, 0.9 fantasy points per minute, and a usage rating of just 13. Yeah, he's not touching the basketball unless he's rebounding it, maybe making an assist, maybe snatching up a steal, maybe blocking a shot for you. So otherwise, yeah, he's not touching the basketball a whole lot. So again, just to recap, I like Steven Adams in the over here. It looks like a very good spot for him. As I navigate around my microphone here, since I can't scroll down, PrizePicks website's effing up. Yeah, I don't really see anybody else that's like standing out as far as a super good like plus matchup. So yeah, those are probably my top plays, my favorite plays from that last game. But that's going to do it for today's video. A little different format, kind of approach things a little bit differently here. What do you guys think about it? Is there anybody that I mentioned that's really starting to catch your eye? Any guys that you're looking to avoid, or you taking the under, the over? PrizePicks, they're ready to shut down the website. So I'm ready to shut down this video. You guys drop a comment below. Let me know who you're liking and who you're not. I appreciate all your support. Tremendous, tremendous support so far, guys. And I can't thank you enough. Thank you for getting me to over 600 subscribers in just under 2 months since being live on YouTube. Thank you again. This is CJ for Out of Bounds DFS. Good luck tonight. And until the next video, guys, let's win some money. Peace.